Good evening, folks. Welcome. I hope you can hear me. I'm still not seen clearly. Welcome. Welcome to the Cinematters New York Social Justice Film Festival 2022. This is our closing night event. Thank you so much for being a part of this and for joining us all weekend. I've been telling people to put a little social justice into their MLK weekend and remember what this is really all about and what we can learn from his legacy. And we're honored to do our part with this film festival that's brought to you by the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. It's an honor to be spending MLK Day every year with our community and with these amazing filmmakers and films and having these discussions. Thank you so much for joining us. Today is your last chance to see the Cinematters films. You can check them all out if you run through very quickly till midnight tonight when the links expire. So please enjoy those. However, you can enjoy all of the conversations for whatever YouTube eternity is on our YouTube channel. We post them after we record them here. So like this one, you can check them out on the Cinematters YouTube channel. Of course, if you enjoyed our films and you enjoy this program and want to see it continue, please help support Cinematters, support us. We do this work not only on MLK weekend, but throughout the year in many, many different ways here at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. I want to just say very publicly that this year, beyond the obvious mission of Cinematters, which is quite inspiring, what really made me proud to do this work and honored to be a part of it was seeing these conversations and seeing these panelists and just hearing from these amazing speakers. So if you haven't been a part of all these conversations, definitely check them all out. We're also honored to collaborate with the Joseph Stern Center for Social Responsibility here at the JCC. And I'd like to acknowledge the hardworking team who makes this festival possible. I'll start with Cheryl Parker, Director of the Joseph Stern Center for Social Responsibility, Kareema B. Partin, who's the Associate Director of Cinematters New York Social Justice Film Festival, and really puts this entire festival together. Barry Lovey is here with us. She's our Major Gifts Officer. Austin Reeders is the Program Manager for the Stern Center. Juliet Kleitz has been with us for a few months now as our Program Manager and is been moderating a lot of these programs from behind the scenes with our amazing AV team, and Sam and Matt have been doing that for us here. Jessica Epstein is our Director of Marketing Operations, and a big thank you to our intern Jocelyn, who's I think come to every event. I think she has, and has been an amazing help to us. We couldn't do this without an amazing team. So really a round of applause for everybody who makes this happen. Also, of course, don't really applaud on Zoom. We can't hear you. Also, of course, our amazing partners who have come in and help spread the word and do the work on the ground all year, and our call to action after seeing these inspiring films and looking to do more. We don't want you just to be entertained. We want you to actually take action, and you could do that with a lot of our partners that make this festival possible. I want to give a big thank you to all of our moderators who made these conversations possible. And of course, to all of our filmmakers who make these amazing movies. And we know how hard it is to make these movies. This is not always the most popular theme for movies. And these filmmakers work often with limited budgets and have to really, it's an uphill battle. And our really heartfelt hats off to all of these amazing filmmakers who were here with us. And of course, finally, I want to thank our audiences for being a part and for joining us throughout this weekend and being a part of the conversation. For those of you who asked questions and enriched this whole program tonight, please ask your questions in the chat and we'll call on you to join in on this conversation. Tonight's film, A Choice of Weapons, inspired by Gordon Parks, speaks deeply to our mission. As I've been saying, we believe in film as a tool for change and for education. And I believe if you've seen the film or if you're going to see the film, you know that that Gordon Parks saw the camera as a powerful tool to inspire and impact. I want to give a huge thank you to the Kuhnhart Film Foundation and their amazing work, who have been with us since year one of this festival. And now I want to hand things over to the person who's really the heart and soul behind this festival and has been doing amazing work making this whole weekend possible. Kareema B. Partin. Over to you, Kareema.
Thank you, Isaac. It's so good to do this again with all of you and to see all of you here. And it does take a team, so I'm grateful to the team for making this happen. With that being said, it's my honor to introduce our speakers for this wonderful Q&A about A Choice of Weapons inspired by Gordon Parks. John Maggio, the director, is here. He is a principal producer and writer as well with ARC Media. Maggio's films have been honored with the National Emmy Award and Writers Guild Award, multiple nominations for News and Documentary Emmy Awards, and have premiered in competition at the Sundance Film Festival. In January of 2018, his film Into the Amazon opened the 30th season of American Experience. Welcome, John.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. Next, we have Jamel Shabazz, best known for his iconic photographs of New York City during the 1980s. A documentary, fashion, and street photographer, he has authored 10 monographs and contributed to over 3 dozen other photography-related books. His photographs have been exhibited worldwide, and his work is housed within the permanent collections of many places, including the Whitney Museum, the Gordon Parks Foundation, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and the Getty Museum. Welcome, Jamel Shabazz.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Next, we have Nelson George, an established author and filmmaker with a passion for telling stories of the Black experience in America. George is the author of several groundbreaking histories of African-American music, including Where Did Our Love Go?, The Rise and Fall of the Motown Sound, The Death of Rhythm and Blues in Hip Hop America. He has published 2 collections of music journalism, Buppies, B-Boys, Baps, and Bohos, Notes on Post-Soul America, and the recent The Nelson George Mixtape, which is available through Pacific Books. Welcome, Nelson George.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And last but not least, our moderator for tonight is Brittany Luse, an award-winning journalist, on-air host, writer, and producer. She currently co-hosts for Colored Nerds, a weekly Black culture podcast founded in 2014. Previously, Brittany co-hosted and executive produced The Nod with Brittany and Eric, a daily streaming show. She also hosted and produced the Nod and Sampler podcast at Gimlet Media. Her culture writing has appeared in many places, including Vulture, Refinery 29, and Harper's Bazaar. Welcome, Brittany.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so honored, I cannot say enough. I'm so honored this evening to have the opportunity to talk about a person so dear to all of our hearts, and also in the company of people whose work has absolutely paved the way and built the foundation for my own. So I'm very grateful to be here with all of you tonight.
Same here. Thank you, Brittany.
All right, let's get started though. John, I'm going to start with you. What personal significance did Gordon Parks hold for you before you made this film?
I grew up with Gordon in many ways. My father is an artist, photographer and sculptor, painter. And in his studios as a kid, I grew up in Buffalo. We didn't have a lot of money. I spent a lot of time with my dad in his studio, which was in the backyard. And he had a compendium, he had always stacks of photography books around. And compendiums of Life magazine photos and things that I would leaf through. And I remember seeing Gordon's early photographs. I remember the Fontanelli family, the 67 series that he did in Harlem, stuck with me in such a way because, like I said, I didn't come from a lot of money. And then when I saw the level of poverty that Gordon was showing people in Life magazine and those photos and the power that they projected, just left an imprint on me as a 10-year-old kid in 1979. And then as I got into documentary film, he was always with me. The desire to capture that kind of intimacy that Gordon did was really a guiding light for me. So when the opportunity arose to make this film, I obviously leapt on it. But I've been thinking about Gordon almost my entire life.
I want to come back to how the film got started, but Jamel, a question for you. In the film, you're featured basically as an artistic descendant of Parks tradition. Talk to me about who Gordon Parks was to you, and how his work has influenced yours over the years.
Wow. It's really something. Just a couple of hours ago, I was watching The Learning Tree again. It aired on TMC. And in watching it, it took me back to my youth, being very young and trying to understand the world around me. I'm a child in the 1960s. I came up during the height of the Vietnam War, the assassinations. So it's really through the work of Gordon Parks and so many other photographers that really gave me a greater understanding of my personal journey. Through The Learning Tree is one of the first films that I probably saw that I saw young kids that looked like me. And then I saw racism for the first time. I didn't know Gordon Parks at that point. All I knew was a movie that was profound and really made me look at the world very differently coming of age during that time period. And even seeing his work indirectly through Life magazine. My family had a subscription, and I was just fascinated with that publication, the imagery and the stories. Again, I'm young, about 8, 9 years old at this time, trying to understand the assassinations, the Vietnam War, everything going on in America. And my school wasn't teaching me. Despite the fact that I went to private school, no one ever talked about King's assassination, the war in Vietnam. So I found that Life magazine was almost like what the internet is to us today. It gave me a broader understanding on life. And subconsciously, I'm looking at the work of Gordon Parks because I remember it vividly because I'm looking at people of color. And I remember the Fontaine family. I remember Red Jackson. I remember the Nation of Islam through the publications. At that time, I wasn't looking at the name. I just saw images that really resonated with me and gave me a broader understanding of the world. And I became almost addicted to Life magazine, National Geographic, Ebony and Jet. So early on, I understood the power of imagery. But when I really got introduced to Gordon Parks, again, indirectly, I was stationed in the United States Army in Germany back in 1978. And I went to the library there on my base, and I read a GI Diary by David Parks. And it's in that one book, I didn't see Gordon as a photographer. I more so saw him as a father writing letters to his son, who was in Vietnam at that time, David. And it reminded me of my relationship with my father. So that book really resonated. So when I came home from the Army in 80, I sought out, to learn more about Gordon Parks. I would research him. And it wasn't until the early 90s where I actually met him. But over the many years, his work influenced me. And in a sense, it served as a roadmap for my direction. Because at that time, I really had no one to guide me. So I found in looking at his work, I started to develop an understanding for documentary, fine art, and fashion photography. So it helped give me direction on how to move forward in this very complicated career.
It absolutely comes through in your work, and also through the documentary that John directed. Nelson, I have a question for you. Parks was not only a photographer, but he was a writer and filmmaker as well, like you. Talk to me about what the title of this film, this phrase that was coined by Gordon Parks, a choice of weapons. Talk to me about what that phrase means to you as a writer and a filmmaker.
Well, to me, Gordon was a role model in the diversity of his activities. Mm-hmm. He's foundation is obviously photography, and he's a great photographer. He's also a very fine writer. He wrote some very nice music. He was a Renaissance man. Mm-hmm. And for me, as a young guy growing up in Brooklyn, I don't remember I first became aware of him. I knew, but before Shaft came out, I did know of him. I think I knew of The Learning Tree, the book, actually. I think that was in the library at my school. Mm-hmm. And I said, wow, this guy's a writer, but no, he's also a director, and he also writes music. And I was like, wow, that's the possibility. So the fact that you could have a career where it wasn't a one-track experience, that you could do this and do that, and that was okay, and it was possible, because the career that I have, when I've been able to direct movies and docs, and also write books and write articles, it's all made possible by the foundation of someone like Gordon Parks. Because when he came up, the barriers to doing all of that were immense. Mm. And so every time he did something, he was opening a door and opening the eyes of white consumers and white financiers to Black talent, but inspiring generations behind him. So he was very much, for me, a person of multiplicity. And I just love, the fact is, when I first found out he did the Paris collections, after seeing his civil rights work, I was knocked out. I mean, brother can do that. You know, I mean, it was really, so for me, it was almost like, he was almost, there was always a wow moment with him. The fact that, you know, I look back at The Learning Tree and you compare it to Shaft, these could be two completely different filmmakers.
Yeah.
But what that says is the range of the Black experience, that it wasn't just the street with the leather jacket and the cool Times Square stuff, but it also wasn't just a rural experience dealing with oppression in the Midwest. It's all of that was embodied in him. And so when you say choice of weapons, he was able to wield a number of different swords, you know, and at a time when that wasn't just done, it just wasn't possible. You were this, or you were that, or you were that. He was all of that. And so for me, he was quite an immense figure. And the weapons he chose were weapons that he could wield and cut down large forests that were in front of him that allowed others to come through the clearing.
It was so beautifully put, and it was so beautifully depicted in the film. John, talk to me about how this film came to be. Like, what inspired you to make it? You talked about how you've been aware of and in some ways chasing Gordon Parks, you know, since you were a kid. But how did you go from being inspired by somebody to producing, you know, a full-length documentary? That's a long road.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, you know, in listening to Jamel and Nelson, there are, you know, I never set out to make the definitive Gordon film. There are many films to be made about Gordon, the writer, Gordon, the composer, the filmmaker. I mean, I don't spend a tremendous amount of time on the film. I was motivated because I felt like we were just so awash in imagery right now, with powerful imagery that, you know, that has moved a lot of people to social change, opened up a lot of eyes in the world through Instagram and everything. Everyone's got, you know, a quote unquote, that weapon, that tool in their hands now, right? It's very powerful.
Yeah.
And that's really was the guiding thought I had in my head when I started to think about how to tell Gordon's story. I didn't want to do a traditional biography. And so I kind of set out originally just looking for those people who I felt were living the sort of legacy of Gordon. And I met Devin Allen first. I mean, I was obviously aware of and in love with Jamel's work. But Devin was somebody I met, Devin Allen in Baltimore, somebody I met early on. And I saw Gordon's life in him, you know, and not unlike Jamel and LaToya, Ruby Frazier, some people for whom when that camera came in their hand, they got their voice, you know what I mean? And Devin, Devin talks about it in the film that, you know, he was hustling on the streets, he was selling drugs, he was watching his friends die. And then he bought a camera and it literally changed his life. And he didn't use it to make, you know, to go into the commercial world. He used it to document his community and to make that kind of change. And I was so inspired by that. And it was through getting to know these guys that I translated back to Gordon's life. And I started to see this sort of roadmap for that way of thinking and seized on the idea of a choice of weapons. And so very much so, it was like almost as a director, I was sort of curating really the story of these three artists and others who've been inspired by Gordon. And that's kind of what I set out to do. You know, I do, there's so much about Gordon, the person, and his personal style and his personal life, and that is so sexy that you do want to kind of dive in and more. I think there will be plenty of other films. I'm hopeful that maybe somebody will be inspired by this film to make a scripted, you know, series about the life of Gordon Parks. It is the gift that keeps on giving in so many ways. But for me, it was really about wanting to bring Gordon into the present day and see his legacy today and these other artists. And I think they really came through. I mean, it was, you know, COVID intervened as well in the making of this. And so getting out in the field with the photographers, Jamel and I were out together once on a really hot day in August, you know, fully masked and trying to make it seem ahistorical in some way. So there were a lot of challenges, but, you know, it really is their story to tell. And I hope it, like I say in the title, inspires other people to learn about Gordon.
What do you think was, John, what do you think was, I mean, obviously, one of the things that I love the most about the documentary is the fact that it doesn't just show sort of the stewards of Parks' legacy, like Devin Allen, LaToya, Ruby Frazier, and of course, you, Jamel. And of course, you talked to his collaborators, his loved ones, and also, you know, people who have been greatly influenced by his work and are really good at sort of distilling what made Gordon Parks so special, like Nelson and Jelani Cobb. But I think that the way that you incorporated the past and the present, specifically by linking aspects of Gordon Parks' photography practice to specific photographers, what made you want to, how did you decide which aspects of Gordon Parks' work you wanted to sort of like home in on? Specifically, I think about with Jamel, like the humanity and bringing out the humanity of the subjects. With LaToya Reed Frazier, being able to do that really incredible documentary work where she's sort of going somewhere and observing, but also getting to know her subjects and sort of following them and sometimes placing them and doing portraiture. Or with Devin, who is doing a lot of that in the moment documentation. How did you decide which aspects of Gordon Parks' legacy you wanted to explore through the present day photographers that you followed?
Well, it was through meeting them and talking about them and kind of studying their work with a little bit of critical distance. Mm-hmm. And there were those aspects of that you rightly point out about Gordon's work that I think were the hallmarks of his work. I'm a big Robert Frank fan, the great American or Swedish Jewish American photographer who did The Americans. And I was always struck when you put those two artists together, you start to realize that in so many ways, Frank's work was always this arm's length, almost fetishizing the American experience from this very outsider perspective. And with Gordon, I was really struck by the intimacy that he was able to create, right? And so that really drew me into what Jamel and LaToya, especially in embedding herself with a community, going to Flint, Michigan, living with that community, gaining their trust in a way that was so important. And then when we traveled with them down to Mississippi, I was so struck by the ease with which she was living with his family. I mean, that she had become like a part of the family. And it just struck me that like, this is exactly Gordon's technique. You can't, Spike Lee says it in the film, you're not going to get those photos without the trust and the intimacy that he was able to get. And so LaToya struck me as somebody who was carrying that through. With Jamel, I saw the same thing. Jamel, when you talk to him, you just feel his energy. He just wanted to be a mentor to these young people, and that was the great thing about Gordon was that, he always tried to help these people, whether he's buying them, he bought the Fontanellis a house and helped raise money. He was always raising money for these things. He kind of broke through that fourth wall, or he allowed the public by having this great platform. He totally utilized life to help not just shed light on a situation, but to actually, raise money for some of his subjects. And then with Devin, I just saw so much of Gordon's early life, a guy who, like I said, discovered this camera and discovered he had a voice and then used it for his community. Devin doesn't do anything outside of, everything he does is so focused on Baltimore, that commitment to that community and the commitment to using his camera as a tool and as a weapon for social change was just really powerful. So those links, as I got to know these characters, just emerged back to Gordon's life. And it just seemed, it was just a kind of logical succession of a narrative in a way. Just in many ways, it revealed itself. Most of the films I do have this effect that if I go out and start shooting something with preconceived notions about what I think the story is going to be, I'm always fooled. I get in the edit room and the film tells you what it is, At a certain point, a film will tell you the direction to take it in. And this one, once I had all these guys on camera and spent time with them, that narrative just kind of emerged, and it, like I said, it told me that I followed that path to, I think, good success.
I would absolutely agree. That makes me think. That makes me want to turn the question to you, Jamel. You were a subject in this documentary. Normally, you're the person who's sort of like at a remove. You're taking a photo. You're engaging with people, trying to gain their trust. In this situation, you had John following you. Talk to me about the unique opportunity that you had to be a subject in this film, because you were basically highlighted as one of the stewards of Gordon Parks' legacy, as I was saying earlier, especially as it pertains to his knack for centering the humanity of his subjects. What was it like to be able to reflect on his legacy while also kind of giving a peek into your practice as a photographer?
I have to say, with all honesty, it was very challenging for me because I'm very comfortable behind the camera, and having a lens turned on me is challenging because I tend to work hard to create content, and I go against my grain, but I strive. And the good thing about the shoot that we did, I was working on the fashion shoot as a favor for a friend, so I had young people document, and that's something that I really do. But nevertheless, it gave an opportunity for the young people to get shine, and I felt that was very important for me to do. But it's something I'm still working on right now because I realize I have a very important voice, and I have to seize every opportunity that comes my way to speak about my journey. I wish I could have done more because there's just so much to talk about in terms of my path. But I felt honored with the invitation to participate in this very important conversation. And it is my hope that I was able to shed light on certain issues that I'm very passionate about. And one of the things I remember, because I only watched the film one time, but in my speaking about Red Jackson was very important to me because Red Jackson represents so many young men I met throughout my entire life. Even me being a Red Jackson. So just to have an opportunity to give voice to my community, to illuminate a subject that is not often spoken about in this day and time was very important to me. So I embraced it. I'm honored to be a part of it. I feel it's a very important film. It's opened up the eyes. It's enlightening a lot of people to the genius of Gordon Parks. And I'm just happy to be a part of that. I take great pride in holding that baton and trying to uphold the legacy of Gordon Parks, not only in documenting the history and culture, but serving as a mentor, using my funds to help programs in need. And what I find very important right now, going back to the Red Jacksons, so many of them are reaching out to me right now seeking guidance. And I'm happy that I'm in a position right now, not even a photographer, I put the camera down, but now to serve as a guide, and even a student to a lot of these young men who have gone through different hardships in their life. So again, I use these opportunities now to just try to plant a seed. I'm still trying to become a better storyteller, but I embrace every opportunity that comes to me right now. And it's just my hope that I could just, give guidance to someone.
I think that's a beautiful legacy. And as with Gordon Parks, it's like that practice outside of holding the camera definitely informs the work that we see as the viewers that you're doing behind the camera. Nelson, to turn to you quickly, in the film, you make the connection between Gordon Parks and the hip hop generation, specifically the 1998 photo that Parks took of a group of hip hop legends in Harlem called A Great Day in Hip Hop, after Parks' own A Great Day in Harlem, historic portrait of so many jazz legends from 1958. You later made a short documentary about that day the following year in 1999, and you speak about it so beautifully in this documentary. But if you could expand on that a little bit, why was that moment, that Great Day in Hip Hop, why was that generational exchange so important?
Well, I mean, quite honestly, the people who organized the photo shoot, which was XXL Magazine, they knew to get all of those artists to come to this one spot in Harlem to take the photo, they needed a photographer that would iconically draw them. And so Gordon turned him down, I think, at least 2 or 3 times before he finally agreed to do it. I don't know the reasons, but he's like, he might not even really know. I don't know how much he knew about hip hop, honestly.
Yeah.
But certainly, when they finally got him to agree to do the photo, there are so many of the artists who grew up with Gordon's photographs in their home, had seen his movies, were aware of his legend. And so he was a huge reason why so many people showed up. And after the photo was over, literally you have artists from Houston coming with their photo book, artists from Uptown come with their photo book, that he was a part of the texture of Black culture, that these young men who and most of the people in the photograph, remember, it's 90s, the photos taken in the late 90s, but these are children of the 70s and 80s. So he is one of the figures that like me, we grew up with, like Jamal grew up with. So that his presence is a validation for a lot of them of the work they were doing. Because at that time, hip hop is, people take for granted hip hop's mainstream culture now. Late 90s, it still wasn't. Biggie and Tupac had just been shot a year or two before the photo. So hip hop is still very much a point of controversy and contention in the culture. So for him to come and photograph them, it was a validation of their art form and of their generation. And so it was a major event. And I don't think a photograph would have all had resonance with all those artists there. But there have been other photographs with groups of rappers. The fact that Gordon Parks shot the hip hop generation, that's what made that magic.
I absolutely 100% agree. This is a question I have for all of you. To me, this film is about what it means to be an artist rising to meet the demands of his time. And I think we all agree that Gordon Parks more than met the demands of his time, he exceeded the demands of his time. What do you see as the current demands of our time that you feel artists should be responsive to? And John, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I mean, my gosh, there's so much going on. It's a great question, and I don't know how we bridge the gap of just division. We're such a divided country, and I don't know. I'm currently making a film right now. I've been going back and forth to Washington on the first year of the Biden administration. It's called Year One, and you spend enough time in Washington, man, and you just realize they're so far apart down there, and it seems to represent what's going on in the culture as well. And I don't know if there's an artistic figure that can help bridge that gap, how we pull together people through our common humanity in some way. And I think it really is, it's going to be the artist that hopefully can come in and sort of bridge that gap. But I don't know how. I honestly don't know how. You're reaching me on a day where I feel like, I wish Dr. King's words had more resonance for me right now, because they just, it's such a tricky time. I find it, you spend too much time in DC, it's hard not to get jaded, but you recognize how, even just walking through the halls of congressmen, no one's talking to each other. I used to work in DC in the 90s, in the Clinton era, and, people hung out, people party, people, and it's just not that way anymore. And I worry about I think the future of our democracy is a big issue, and it's an all-encompassing issue. So the artists are going to get us out, but I just don't know the way forward.
Thank you so much, John. Jamel, what about you? What do you see? What are you seeing happening in the world that you feel like it's urgent that artists be responsive to right now?
That's such a great question, because that's the motivation behind everything I do. Going back to the 1960s, that protest time when people were taken to the street, not only here in America, but around the world, protesting injustice, that really resonated with me. In addition to the protest music of that time period, artists came together across the color line, using that platform to use that global language to reach out to people around the world. And it really made a difference. So I believe in that. I came up during the time period of Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, the Isley Brothers, Harvest for the World, and Crystal Blue Persuasion, where artists, of all the confusion, really took a proactive position to make statements. And as a student of the Black arts movement, I saw the power of art early on. So when I came home from the Army, I was looking for the poets, the musicians, the painters. I wanted to understand it, because I saw that global language could really make a difference, especially during that time period when it was very turbulent as well, because we were talking about the crack epidemic. We were talking about the AIDS epidemic. We were going through a very difficult time, the war on drugs. So I was trying to use my platform to sound the alarm of concern that we as artists got to come together. All of us, for the most part, all of us were given that divine gift of art. We just have to search out and find this, and then look at a subject matter that is close to our heart and focus on and educate it, both the writers, everyone. I feel in this day and time, we need all hands on deck. And I agree with John. There's a division right now, but it's only through the art community we could bring about change. One of the greatest moments in my life happened back in 2006, when I was invited by the government of Korea, South Korea, to travel there with a lot of other artists from around the world. It was an international b-boy conference called the R16 competition, where b-boys around the entire globe come together under the banner of hip hop. And rather than battle with weapons, they battle on the dance floor. And what I found so interesting about this experience, the government hooked us up, and we were all living in the same hotel. You're talking about people from Japan, China, Russia, Israel, France, Belgium, Brazil, and so many other countries. Many of them didn't even share the same language. And all of these men could have easily have been in the elite military armies. They could have all been the elite of the elite because they were all military-aged men. But rather than battle with weapons, they battled on the dance floor. And it was incredible for me. And to document all, one of my most important photographs, where I got all of these B-boys together in a hotel, and we took a group shot. And to me, that represented hope and possibility. And many might condemn hip-hop, but it's that global language that is really transcending around the world and bringing people together. I was stunned to see Russians breakdancing. I've never seen that before. Young men from South Africa breakdancing. Koreans, which became #1 in b-boying. So I strongly feel that we are living in a very critical time now. I'm pained behind everything I'm seeing right now. The violence and having the ability now to use your cell phone to document things around you, where people are more concerned with likes rather than trying to stop fights. You know, so the level of violence I'm seeing is out of control. So I'm calling upon all artists. We need all hands on deck right now. You know, what I found, one of my deepest experiences in life besides going to Korea was when I went to the Gordon Parks High School in Minnesota. And it was Gordon Parks' niece, Robin Hickman, that invited me to come there. And I did a presentation with some young students. And I talked about the power of love songs. This might have been about 6 years ago. And none of the kids knew what love songs were. They could not relate to love songs. And that broke my heart, because it's due to the love songs that we learned how to love and we became empathetic. And to find young kids that had no clue on what love songs were, they didn't care about it, they had no knowledge of it, that broke my heart. So I feel now that, again, we need all artists on deck. We need artists to do artwork that provokes thought. We need songs that bring about unity and love. We need photographs that expose different situations that are going on, from global warming to violence to hatred. We can make a difference, and time is running out right now. You know, I've never seen so much division in my life outside of coming up in the 1960s. So I think that it's a very troubling time, and we need not only artists here in this country, but we need artists around the entire globe to use their various platforms, both to showcase artwork, but also to use that platform to raise currency for those who are less fortunate.
Thank you so much for that, Jamel. So much wisdom. I really appreciate it. Nelson, if you could bring us home, what do you see artists needing to be responsive to in the world right now?
Themselves. I think I would argue that artists need to turn off their phones, turn off their TVs, and look inward. I think that a lot of what happens, unfortunately, is in protest art, is that we see a piece of work and we know what the work is going to say, because it's already positioning itself as a piece of agitprop for a position. And that's and so things become white noise as opposed to being motivators. I really think that I would urge young artists to really look, what is my experience? What is the individual journey I'm dealing with? But number one, turn off the noise. It's so hard now for someone to have a clear vision when everything around you is telling you this, that, you get distracted by this, distracted by that. The ability to see the world uniquely is cluttered by that. I mean, I had this one memory of seeing Gordon. I was lucky enough to go to a party at his house. I don't know, in the late 90s. I'm not sure when exactly it was, but he picked up somebody's camera. Someone had an Instamatic camera, you know, and he took a picture with it. And a couple of months later, I ran into the person whose phone it was, the camera it was. And the picture was a stunning picture. It was a beautiful picture. And what I realized is that whatever else the world communicates, whatever else, he had a way of seeing the world that he transferred through his lens. And it was very unique and very personal. So I'm always about artists cultivating the thing about them that's unique, to finding that voice that is their own. And if they do so, they bring a vision to the world that touches people in a special way. So I think this is actually a great time for introspection and to trying to figure out who the hell you are and what you're really trying to say. Because it's so easy to fall into the trap of following what's going on. But all the artists that we think about, we think about their individual voice, whether it's Shakespeare or Gordon, the artists who have a special, unique way of thinking. And that's only cultivated through a focus and not being, you got to turn this shit off.
Oh, and all three of you, thank you so much. I'm going to throw it to Kareema right now for questions from the audience. This was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brittany.
Awesome. Okay, let's see if we have any questions. I have a question. For everyone, if you could just tell us what's next for you. How can we support each of you? If you want to drop any links, we would love that, so that the support doesn't stop at Cinematters. So John, I see your square up first. Do you want to go first? What's next for you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm making, I was in a band many years ago with an artist named Cody Chestnut. And Cody and I are old friends, and he and I are taking a journey back in time, because it's a little bit of, he fell off the map a little bit. And with the Roots Phrenology album coming up, of which he had a hit song on there, Cody and I are putting together a film. So that's a passion project of mine. I'm also doing a film with HBO, like I said, about the Biden administration, which will be out probably early in the spring. But yeah, that's what I got going on.
All righty, everyone look out for that. Who's next? Brittany, what's going on? What's next with you?
I'm still making For Colored Nerds. It comes out every Tuesday. We have a new episode. Lots of fun conversations about Black culture, always having a good time. And I am always working on some type of writing that I'm supposed to be doing. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the time being.
Awesome. If you have the link, please drop it in the chat so that we can continue to listen. Mr. Shabazz, how about you? What's next?
I'm currently working on 4 major solo shows to jumpstart the year. I have an exhibition at the end of the month called Peace to the Queen. It's at the University of Austin, and it's a whole exhibition on Black and brown women. So I'm showing it for the very first time. It's being curated by Janelle Ajani. So it opens up on January 29th. I have another exhibition in Charlotte, North Carolina called Reflections of a People, curated by Dexter Wilberly. And that's pretty much a mini retrospective of my work from the 1980s. And I'm also have an exhibition at the Bronx Museum coming up this April, which is a retrospective as well.
Love it, love it, love it. Make sure y'all check that out. And last but not least, Mr. George.
Well, I have 2 projects coming out this spring. I'm an executive producer of a 5-part docu-series on Faney and Tupac Shakur. It's called Dear Mama. It'll be on FX sometime around Mother's Day. I think it's going to drop. And that's going to be interesting. It's a 5-part exploration. And a lot of it, there's as much Afeni as it is Tupac in it, which is important. She was an amazing woman. And everything Tupac was, Afeni was first, And the second piece is a documentary on a baseball player named Willie Mays. And that'll be out, I think right now, tentatively July 6th, directed for HBO. So it's funny about Willie. Willie's one of the great, I think Willie's the greatest baseball player who ever lived. But because baseball has become less American experience, the way basketball and football has taken over, Willie's own stature as the greatest player has sort of, it's been diminished as the game has become, and certainly in the Black community, baseball doesn't mean anything of what it used to mean. So it's a way, hopefully, to refresh his legacy. He's 90 years old. He's still with us. He's the oldest living Hall of Fame baseball player. So it's a way to recontextualize a great athlete.
That's really exciting. I can't wait to see that. I'm going to hand it back to Isaac. Thank you so much to all of you for this conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you for this amazing conversation. And Brittany, thank you especially for leading this and really asking such great questions. I also want to give a big thank you to Emily Keaton from the Kuhnhart Film Foundation that I mentioned earlier. And she mentioned in the chat that the film is going to be available for schools and cultural organizations beginning next month. And you can find more information there. Yes, every school should see this, right? So please help spread the word on that as well. I want to, just before we finish, give a huge thank you also to Heidi Rieger, who helped connect us to this. She's a member of our committee, and I want to give, this is an opportunity to thank our entire committee who watch the films, who help us select the films, who give us, make the connections, who help structure our program, and are really a big part of all of this. A huge, huge thank you. Also, a thank you to our generous supporters, Megan Bennett Goodman. A big thank you to Dolby, who came on board this year to help support our youth program, and to the Harnish Foundation. This really could not happen without any of these groups or people. Again, a big, big thank you to all of you for being a part of this, for participating, for coming, for spending your MLK Day with us. I couldn't think of a better way to spend it in this time. Hopefully we could do this in person next year. And of course, we'll be doing this throughout the year. We love your input. We love your feedback. We love making you a part of this. So please don't be silent. We will be sending out a survey and would love any feedback to help make this as great as possible for the future. I'm really glad to see our friend Shamika out there, who's there too, and so many other familiar faces. Thank you all. Thank you for being a part. Have a good night. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.